Before he entered my life, I wasn't perfect, but I was whole. I had been working since I was 18, not because anyone forced me to, but because I genuinely liked the feeling of building things on my own, my money, my choices, my independence. I didn't need permission for my plans. I simply made them happen. I had clear goals: to grow professionally, to save money, to build something that belonged to me. I never dreamed of being supported by someone else. I dreamed of sharing a life and two people walking side by side, building together. Love, to me, was never a crutch. It was companionship. I laughed easily. I spoke my mind. I changed my opinions without apologizing. I had insecurities like everyone does, but they didn't paralyze me. I kept moving. When I met him, I wasn't lonely. I wasn't broken. I wasn't empty. I was open. And that was the opening. He didn't arrive making noise. He arrived like a solution, calm, reasonable, always with a logical answer for everything. At first, it sounded like genuine admiration. I like your independence. You're not like other women. It's rare to find someone who knows what she wants. I heard those words as compliments. Today, I know they were part of a script. The first changes were subtle. He never said, "Don't do that." Instead, he said things like, "Are you sure? That seems risky. I don't think you need to work this hard. I can take care of that for you. Relax." It sounded like care. It was control wrapped as a gift. Slowly, I started asking for his opinion before making decisions. I began justifying my dreams, softening my ideas so I wouldn't sound too much. And the worst part? I thought I was maturing. He called it balance. I called it peace. The truth, it was silence. The change didn't happen all at once. It was like water slowly heating. By the time you notice, you're already burned. I started rereading my messages before sending them, rehearsing conversations in my head, choosing words that wouldn't cause discomfort. He didn't yell, he didn't insult me, but he had a look, the kind of look that said you're being childish without a single word. And I began policing myself. I stopped suggesting ideas at work because he said I was too impulsive. I stopped making plans because he thought they were premature. I stopped existing out loud. There was one specific day that stayed with me. I was excited about a professional opportunity. Nothing huge, but it was mine. I told him, expecting support. He listened in silence, then took a deep breath and said, "On your own, you wouldn't be able to sustain this." The word "alone" landed like a stone. That night, I decided not to try, and that was the first yes I gave to his control. Others followed. He began speaking like someone who knew. Not, "I think." It was, "This is how it is." The market doesn't forgive naive people. People will take advantage of you. You feel too much, that's dangerous. And I started seeing the world through his eyes. It wasn't him saying no anymore. It was me. I began discarding opportunities before even trying, doubting my intuition, waiting for approval before acting. He called it maturity. I called it security. The truth, it was a prison with Wi-Fi. There was a conversation that marked everything. I told him I missed who I used to be. I chose my words carefully, afraid of sounding dramatic. He listened, then replied with that calm tone that always irritated me. "You confuse freedom with chaos. I help you become better." Become better. Better according to whom? At the time, I didn't know how to answer. Today, I do. Better according to him. The discovery didn't arrive like thunder. It arrived as a phone notification. I was in the living room, organizing some papers. His phone buzzed on the table. He was in the shower. I'm not the kind of person who goes through someone else's phone, but the message appeared on the locked screen. "Last night was amazing. When are you going to tell her?" My stomach turned before my mind could catch up. When he came out of the shower, I was still holding the phone. "Who is this?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. He looked at the screen, then at me, and made that face, the face of someone who already had a script prepared. "You wouldn't understand," he said calmly. "It's not what you're thinking, but it was exactly what I was thinking." He sat on the edge of the bed, took a deep breath, and began speaking in that tone he used whenever he believed he was explaining something too complex for me. "I met someone," he said without looking away. "Someone who has her own opinions, who doesn't need my approval for everything." That felt like a slap, not because of the betrayal. In that moment, I already knew I had been betrayed, but because of the audacity of using it as justification. "Do you know what the problem is?" he continued, as if doing me a favor. "You became a shadow. I tried to help you grow, but you just became dependent." I stayed silent, not because I agreed, but because I was processing the inversion. He had spent years shaping me into exactly what he wanted: small, manageable, compliant, and now he was using that as an excuse to betray me. "She's different," he said, almost with enthusiasm. "She challenges me. She questions things. She doesn't wait for me to solve everything." I took a deep breath and for the first time in a long while spoke without measuring my words. "You mean the way I was before you?" He blinked, as if he hadn't thought of that. "It's not the same thing," he replied defensively. "It's exactly the same," I said, feeling something awaken inside me. "You spent years telling me I was impulsive, exaggerated, that I didn't think things through. And now you're replacing me with someone who is exactly what you destroyed in me." Silence. He tried to respond, but there was no argument, because it was true, and he knew it. After a few uncomfortable seconds, he returned to the original script. "Look," he said in that rational voice. "I'm leaving. It's better this way. You'll suffer at first, but..." And then came the sentence. "On your own, you won't survive." He didn't say it angrily. He said it like someone stating a scientific fact. In that moment, something inside me broke, but not in the way he expected. It wasn't despair. It was razor-sharp clarity. When he walked out with his suitcase and that expression of someone who believed he was doing the world a favor, the house felt enormous. Not because of the physical space, but because of the echo of irony. He had shaped me into what he wanted, then discarded me because I was no longer what he wanted, and still had the audacity to say I was the problem. That night, sitting alone in the living room, I felt many things: anger, sadness, relief, confusion. But above all, I felt something new: indignation. Not the explosive kind that makes you scream, but the cold, lucid kind that makes you decide. The first days were strange. I woke up on autopilot, worked, ate, replied to messages, but at night the silence felt heavy, and his voice echoed, "You can't handle this. You'll see." Was I afraid? Yes. Did I cry? Yes. Did I think about asking for help? Yes. But something new happened. I stayed standing. In the third month, I faced a serious problem. One of those situations I would have immediately handed over to him before. I sat on the living room floor, papers scattered, mind overwhelmed. I spent hours trying to understand it, making mistakes, starting over. When I finally solved it, my hands were shaking, but the problem was solved. I had done it on my own. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't fast, but it was real, and it started happening again and again. Each small victory dismantled piece by piece the image he had painted of me. I wasn't incapable. I was out of practice trusting myself. There was a night when I cried from exhaustion, not from sadness, but from confused liberation. I cried for the woman I had silenced, for the time I spent believing I needed permission. And in that crying, something rearranged itself. I didn't promise revenge. I didn't promise success. I promised only this: I would not disappear. If you're enjoying this story, hit like and subscribe to Stories We Tell, because sometimes the best revenge is becoming everything they said you couldn't be. After that day, something changed in the way I woke up. There was still fear, but there was also curiosity. What if he was wrong? What if I could do this? Not as a grand triumph, but as continuation. I didn't become someone else. I still stumbled. I still remembered. But now every step was mine. Meanwhile, he continued believing he had left someone broken. He probably still tells the story that way. And in a sense, he's right. The version of me he knew didn't survive. She had to end so another could begin. Rebuilding didn't begin with a grand decision. It began with small, daily choices. Choosing to get up even when I didn't feel like it. Choosing to face difficult conversations. Choosing to trust myself when no one else confirmed anything. At first, everything felt overwhelming. The bills, the responsibilities, the expectations. But over time, I realized something. I could handle it. I solved problems I would have automatically handed over to him before. I negotiated deadlines, organized my finances, made imperfect decisions, and survived them. Making mistakes wasn't proof of weakness. It was proof of autonomy. I returned to doing things he considered immature, walking without a destination, reading for pleasure, making plans that didn't have to be profitable, only possible. Each gesture was a small reconnection with myself. One afternoon, I caught myself laughing alone, not loudly, just lightly, spontaneously. That's when it made sense. I was never weak. I was limited by someone else's perspective. When someone watches you as incapable for long enough, you start acting that way. Not because it's true, but because it feels inevitable. That realization hurt. It hurt to see how much I had allowed someone else to define my limits, but at the same time, it was liberating, because if I had learned to shrink, I could learn to expand again. I began trusting my intuition more, acting without guarantees, accepting that absolute security doesn't exist, only movement. And the more I moved, the less sense his old certainties made. There was one specific moment that marked this shift. I received a difficult message, the kind that would have left me anxious all day before. I read it, breathed, replied clearly, no extra explanations, no unnecessary apologies. Then I put the phone down and went on with my day. I didn't wait for a response. I didn't rehearse arguments in my head. I didn't stay trapped. That to me was a huge victory, not because it was something extraordinary, but because it was something I couldn't have done before. I was becoming someone who trusted herself again, not the same woman as before, but a more aware version of her, with boundaries, with scars, with choices. And for the first time since the separation, I thought of him without a tightness in my chest. I thought of him with distance, with neutrality. That surprised me. I realized he still occupied a space, but he no longer commanded anything inside me. And when someone loses command, they lose power. The encounter wasn't planned. It happened the way the most important things usually do, by chance. I was sitting in a cafe, working quietly, wrapped in that new kind of calm that comes from trusting yourself again. That's when I saw him across the street. For a brief moment, my body reacted. An old reflex, my heart sped up slightly. But something curious happened. The reaction passed. It didn't turn into anxiety. It didn't turn into fear. It turned into simple recognition. He walked into the cafe a few minutes later, looked around, took a while before noticing me. When our eyes met, I saw something I had never seen on his face before. Hesitation. He smiled, but the smile came late. He approached carefully, as if he wasn't sure who was sitting in front of him. "Hi," he said. "Hi," I replied. There was a brief silence, awkward only for someone who still needed to prove something. I didn't. He mentioned that he had seen me from a distance, that he almost didn't come in, that he was surprised to find me there alone, so calm. "You look well," he said, almost like a question. I nodded naturally. "I am. Nothing more. No explanations. No report on my life." He pulled out a chair and asked if he could sit. I agreed, not out of excessive politeness, but out of choice. We talked about neutral things, work, the weather, people we both knew. He kept trying to find openings to bring up the past. I stayed firmly in the present. At one point he commented, "You've changed." There was surprise in his voice. Not admiration, not criticism, just acknowledgement. I took a few seconds before answering, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I chose the simplest truth. "I haven't changed," I said calmly. I came back to myself. He fell silent. For the first time, he didn't seem to have a ready response. He tried to smile again, said he had always known I was strong, that maybe he had been too hard on me. That time makes people grow. I listened, but I didn't absorb it because I realized something essential in that moment. He needed me to have grown after him so his narrative could remain comfortable. He needed to believe my strength had appeared because of his absence. Not that it had always been there. Before leaving, he mentioned, casually, almost as if talking about the weather, that things hadn't worked out after we separated. He didn't go into details. He didn't explain. He didn't need to. The woman he had used as justification for leaving me was no longer part of the story. Maybe we could talk again sometime, he said before standing up. I smiled, a light, polite smile, without promises. Maybe, I replied. But we both knew there wouldn't be another time. When he walked out, I stayed seated for a few minutes, watching the street. There was no relief, no explosive sense of victory. There was something far more valuable, serene indifference. He had seen me, but he no longer had access, and that was final. He said I wouldn't survive on my own. At the time, those words sounded like a sentence, not because they were spoken with cruelty, but because they were spoken with certainty. Enough certainty for me to start doubting myself. Looking back now, I understand something I couldn't see then. Some people don't diminish us because they are cruel. They diminish us because they need to feel bigger. He never truly believed I was incapable. He believed I needed to believe that, and for a while, it worked. But surviving was never my limit. Surviving was only the beginning. After he left, after fear lost its grip, after his voice stopped echoing inside me, something began to happen quietly. I started to bloom, not like someone winning a war, but like someone learning how to breathe again. Blooming for me wasn't instant success. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't proving anything to anyone. It was something far more intimate, recognizing myself again, recognizing my limits without shame, recognizing my desires without guilt, recognizing my strength without needing to announce it. I bloomed when I stopped over-explaining, when I understood that I didn't need to justify my choices to those who weren't walking beside me, when I accepted that making mistakes didn't make me smaller, it made me human. I bloomed when I listened to my intuition again, the same intuition he called reckless, the one I had silenced to seem reasonable. It never abandoned me, it simply waited. I bloomed when I learned to be alone without feeling lonely. When I realized silence isn't emptiness, it's space, and space is where growth happens. There were difficult days, of course, long nights, moments when I wondered how things could have been different. But even then, something had already changed. I no longer saw myself as someone who needed to be saved. He thought I wouldn't survive on my own because he had never seen my strength without the filter of his convenience. He had never seen me without the adaptations, without the silences, without the retreating. When he met me, I was whole. When he was with me, I held myself back. When he left, I set myself free. And this is the part he will never fully understand. It wasn't his absence that made me strong. It was the end of my doubt about who I was. Today, when I think of the woman at the beginning of this story, I feel tenderness, not pity, not shame, tenderness. She did the best she could with what she knew. She believed, she tried, she adapted, thinking it was love, and still, she survived. But the woman I am now, she doesn't just survive, she lives. She lives with more calm, with less noise, with choices that don't require approval. She no longer shrinks to fit. She doesn't negotiate her essence to keep relationships. She doesn't confuse love with control or care with limitation. He said I wouldn't survive on my own, and he was right about only one thing. The woman he knew didn't survive. She had to leave, so another one could bloom. 3 years later, we met again, this time not in a cafe, but in a parking lot. I was getting out of the car, that car, the same model he used to call an unreachable dream. The same one he said we'd never be able to afford. Only now, I could. He stopped, looked at the car, then at me, and for the first time I saw something I had never seen on his face before, disbelief. "Is that yours?" he asked. I smiled. Not with arrogance, with lightness. It is. He stayed silent for a few seconds, then tried to smile too, unsuccessfully. You're doing well, then. It wasn't a question. It was acknowledgement. I am, I replied. Very well. He looked at the ground, then back at me, as if searching for the woman he had left behind. But she wasn't there anymore. Before leaving, he said one last thing. I just wanted you to know, I always rooted for you. I took a deep breath, not because it hurt, but because it didn't. Thank you, I said sincerely. But I never needed cheering. I needed partnership. And with that, I got into the car. As I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror. He was still there, standing, watching, not with anger, not with regret, with something I knew very well, doubt. The same doubt he once planted in me, only now. It was his. And do you know what I felt? Nothing. No satisfaction of revenge, no pain of memory, just the quiet certainty that I had been right all along. I had always been capable. I just needed to stop listening to those who never believed. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to Stories We Tell, leave a like, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your support helps us keep creating stories about self-worth, resilience, and quiet victories, because the best revenge isn't destroying someone. It's becoming everything they said you couldn't be. Thank you for being here.